This morning, actor Danny Trejo turning into a real-life action star, helping save a young child after this dramatic car crash in Los Angeles Wednesday.
People worldwide recognize Danny Trejo because he possesses a heavily scarred face. He displays a deeply tattooed body, and he performed in hundreds of terrifying villain roles on the cinema screen. He physically played the dangerous bad guy character in more than 300 different Hollywood movies throughout his incredibly long acting career. However, very few individuals actually know that a life completely filled with extreme physical and emotional tragedy exists directly behind his tough physical exterior. His childhood contained massive amounts of daily pain, and this early suffering led him directly into a dark path of criminal activity. Long prison sentences, and a specific situation where he almost died inside a gas chamber. Despite all these terrible historical events, Danny successfully managed to rise from the deepest darkness to become a living symbol of human salvation and true kindness. Danny Trejo was born on May 16, 1944, in Maywood, California, into a Mexican-American family that experienced severe emotional and structural fractures. His mother, Dolores, had a legal husband who was actively fighting overseas during World War II. But she became pregnant through an affair with a man named Dionisio Dan Trejo. Dionisio later became a highly wanted criminal because he used a knife to stab another person during a physical fight. The family members never forgave this act of betrayal, and this situation became a permanent stain that the entire family desperately wanted to hide from the public. Danny grew up as the living physical proof of his mother's infidelity, and his relatives constantly looked at him with cold eyes and kept him completely alienated from normal family activities. Immediately after Danny's birth, the family packed their belongings and fled from Los Angeles to the state of Texas because they needed to avoid the police officers who were actively hunting for Dionisio. When the family finally returned to California, his father decided to surrender himself to the police authorities, and this action left the young boy abandoned inside a continuous cycle of domestic violence. In the year when Danny turned 5 years old, he suffered a minor physical accident that resulted in a dislocated arm. His father intentionally used this small medical incident as an excuse to completely separate Danny from his mother and his sister for 16 long years. And this painful separation lasted from his kindergarten days all the way until he reached adulthood. Because he had no mother and no sister to protect him, Danny lived in extremely crowded conditions with his grandmother and various other relatives, and he constantly tried to shrink his physical presence to avoid causing any unnecessary trouble. However, severe trouble continued to find him because his father acted like an unpredictable storm who brought violence into the house. Starting from the time Danny was only 7 years old, his father frequently grabbed his neck to strangle him, and he beat the young boy brutally even when there was absolutely no logical reason for the punishment. Danny mentally convinced himself that he actually deserved to receive these physical punishments because a young child simply cannot accept the harsh reality that an adult can inflict cruel pain without a valid reason. Inside that specific house, basic human affection appeared as rarely as a magical event. His stepmother, named Alice, served as the only positive light in his life, and she provided the only small moments of warmth while he navigated through a massive ocean of daily suffering. His uncle Gilbert was exactly 6 years older than him, and Gilbert quickly became Danny's very first genuine friend and effectively acted as his older brother figure inside the harsh and violent family dynamic. When Danny reached the exact age of 8 years old, Gilbert physically introduced the young boy to smoking marijuana, and they treated this illegal drug consumption as a strict secret bond shared exclusively between the two of them. By the time Danny turned 12 years old, he verbally forced his older uncle to physically inject his arm with liquid heroin, and he suffered a massive medical overdose immediately during this very first injection process. The heavy dose of chemical heroin caused Danny's physical body to shut down completely, and he came extremely close to experiencing actual physical death right there on the wooden floor. After he barely survived that terrifying medical incident, heroin became too difficult and highly expensive for the two boys to procure on the local streets. So the young boy deliberately switched his daily consumption habit to drinking heavy alcoholic liquor from glass bottles. Danny officially became a subordinate criminal worker for his uncle Gilbert, and he routinely performed dangerous illegal tasks such as physically carrying concealed packages of illegal drugs across the city streets. Danny also walked directly up to drug buyers to physically collect the paper money payments from their hands. And he spent countless hours memorizing the dangerous daily rhythms and the specific behavioral rules of the criminal underworld in Los Angeles. Gilbert physically taught Danny how to fight in organized boxing matches by beating the younger boy with his fists without showing any physical mercy during their training sessions in the yard. This highly violent teaching method successfully transformed physical pain into a normal physical language that the boy understood perfectly and utilized consistently in his own daily life. During these brutal boxing sessions, Gilbert punched Danny directly in the face and the torso repeatedly until Danny learned exactly how to physically block the incoming strikes with his arms and deliver powerful counterpunches with his own closed fists. The extended family strictly forbade any male family member from displaying any soft emotions or physical weakness, and they only permitted the men to verbally express feelings of extreme anger and to display outward physical aggression toward other people. During his teenage years, Danny actively participated in violent street robberies where he physically assaulted victims to steal their personal property and cash. He deliberately robbed local commercial stores by physically threatening the store clerks with weapons and forcibly removing the paper cash directly from their mechanical cash registers. He also engaged heavily in violent street gang activities, which involved physically fighting rival gang members with his fists and weapons to claim physical control over specific neighborhood street territories. In the specific year of 1965, when Danny reached exactly 21 years of age, federal law enforcement officers physically arrested him on the street because he actively sold a white powdery substance to an undercover federal agent. Danny verbally affirmed to the undercover agent that the small package contained illegal heroin, but Danny later claimed during interviews that the package actually contained ordinary white baking sugar. The legal court system officially reviewed the physical evidence and the agent's sworn testimony, and the judge formally sentenced Danny to serve a 10-year physical confinement sentence inside the California state penal system. He physically entered San Quentin State Prison, which operated as a highly notorious and extremely dangerous maximum security facility that constantly housed the most violent criminals in the entire state. Inside this violent concrete facility, he lived inside a completely racially segregated physical environment where making one incorrect eye contact with another prisoner could easily result in a fatal physical stabbing with a sharpened piece of metal. Danny actively sold illicit drugs to other inmates inside the prison walls. He physically collected financial debts from prisoners who owed money, and he deliberately utilized the threat of extreme physical fear as his primary daily weapon to control other human beings. The brutal boxing skills he previously acquired from his uncle Gilbert during his childhood helped him successfully defeat multiple opponents in the prison yard and officially become the lightweight and welterweight boxing champion inside the state prison. This elevated athletic status created a strong physical shield that effectively protected him from random physical attacks by other violent inmates who deeply respected his physical fighting abilities. He witnessed horrifying physical events on a regular daily basis, such as physically watching a man who had just been stabbed violently in the torso, dragging his feet across the concrete floor while actively coughing up dark red blood from his damaged lungs. He quickly learned through direct physical observation that maintaining absolute silence and refusing to verbally cooperate with the armed prison guards constituted the absolute most important behavioral rules for physically surviving the harsh prison experience. In the specific year of 1961, while he was temporarily detained at the Los Angeles County Jail for a different criminal offense, He actually used his own physical strength to protect a weak fellow inmate named Charles Manson. Danny physically stood between Manson and other aggressive inmates to block their physical attacks. And this was the exact same Charles Manson who later orchestrated and committed the shocking and world-famous series of physical murders in the year 1969. In the year 1968, while Danny was actively serving his time at Soledad Prison, he actively participated in the massive and highly violent Cinco de Mayo prison riot that erupted spontaneously in the main recreation yard. During this massive, violent physical altercation between the screaming inmates and the armed guards, Danny bent down, grabbed a heavy rock with his right hand, and threw it forcefully through the air to physically defend his own body from an approaching attacker. However, the heavy rock accidentally flew across the crowded yard and physically struck the side of the head of a prison guard lieutenant, which immediately caused a severe physical injury to the falling officer. This specific violent physical action pushed Danny directly into facing a legal death penalty sentence, which meant the state legally planned to physically execute him by placing him inside the prison's lethal gas chamber. The prison administration severely punished his physical actions by violently grabbing his arms, dragging his body down the hallway, and throwing him directly into solitary confinement for 3 full months inside a tiny concrete cell, universally known as the Hole. Danny firmly considered this sudden legal cancellation as God directly answering his desperate verbal prayer from the dark concrete cell. Starting exactly in the year 1968, he officially joined the Alcoholics Anonymous recovery program and physically attended their regular group meetings while he still lived inside the heavily guarded prison facility. The prison authorities finally released his physical body from their legal custody and opened the heavy metal gates on August 23, 1969. And he immediately kept the exact verbal promise he previously made to God inside the dark cell. He maintained absolute physical sobriety from all illegal chemical drugs and alcoholic beverages. He actively found legal employment working as a certified drug addiction counselor, and he spent his daily time physically rescuing young gang members and severely addicted individuals from the highly dangerous city streets. He physically drove his car to dangerous neighborhoods. He walked directly up to active drug users, and he verbally convinced them to step away from their destructive physical habits. In the specific year of 1985, while Danny was actively working at his counseling job and physically helping a young recovering drug addict stay away from consuming cocaine, he accidentally walked directly onto the active filming location of the Hollywood movie titled Runaway Train. Because he physically possessed an authentic rough physical appearance featuring real prison tattoos permanently inked into his skin and an actual criminal background, the film production staff immediately noticed him standing quietly on the set. An individual working for the film production company verbally invited him to work as a paid background extra, which specifically required him to physically stand in the background of the camera shots while wearing traditional prison clothing. Shortly after he arrived and accepted the extra role, the film producers discovered his extensive historical background in prison boxing matches, and they officially hired him to physically train the famous lead actor Eric Roberts in proper boxing techniques. Danny spent hours physically demonstrating exactly how to punch, how to block incoming strikes, and how to move his feet around the boxing ring so that Eric Roberts would look highly realistic in front of the massive recording cameras. The film director became highly impressed with Danny's authentic physical presence and his highly aggressive boxing movements. So the director eventually gave Danny an actual speaking acting role, playing a direct physical fighting opponent against Eric Roberts in the movie. The movie Runaway Train achieved massive commercial financial success at the public box office, and the film successfully earned multiple highly prestigious Academy Award nominations from the organized film industry. From that specific moment forward, Danny's professional acting career exploded rapidly, and he successfully secured hundreds of different paid acting roles in highly famous Hollywood cinematic productions. He physically walked onto the film sets and performed acting scenes in massively popular movies, including the crime film Heat, the violent action movie Desperado, the vampire horror film From Dusk Till Dawn, and the bloody action movie Machete. In each of these specific film productions, he physically utilized his heavily scarred face, his muscular tattooed arms, and his intensely intimidating physical stare to effectively portray extremely dangerous criminal characters and violent cartel members. He successfully transformed his real-life tough physical exterior and his violent historical past into becoming the absolute most widely recognized and heavily loved bad guy character in the entire Hollywood entertainment industry. In the year 2010, medical doctors conducted a comprehensive series of physical examinations on Danny's body and subsequently discovered that he suffered from a highly dangerous case of liver cancer. The medical imaging equipment specifically located a massive 10-centimeter cancerous tumor that measured the exact physical size of an adult human fist, growing directly inside his liver organ. He firmly decided to keep this severe medical diagnosis a complete secret from the general public and the entertainment media because he deeply feared that Hollywood film directors would immediately stop hiring him for physical acting jobs. He firmly refused to allow the medical doctors to administer traditional chemical chemotherapy treatments directly into his bloodstream, and he instead actively chose to endure a highly specialized and incredibly painful medical procedure. During this specific medical procedure, the doctors physically inserted medical needles into his abdomen and injected radioactive materials directly into the cancerous tumor located in his liver, which caused him to experience immense physical pain for many consecutive months. He physically continued to work on movie sets while secretly enduring this massive internal physical pain, and he successfully completed his demanding acting scenes without verbally complaining to the film production crews. After he fully completed this incredibly painful radioactive medical treatment, the doctors physically confirmed that he successfully cured his liver cancer, but he permanently remained constantly afraid of consuming any medical pharmaceutical drugs that might cause further physical damage to his sensitive liver tissue. This persistent fear of sustaining permanent liver damage caused him to rigorously monitor his physical diet and his daily physical activities much more carefully than he ever had in his entire past life. On the specific date of August 7th, 2019, while he was physically driving his vehicle through the Sylmar neighborhood located within the city of Los Angeles, Danny personally witnessed a severe and highly violent traffic accident occur directly in front of his eyes. He physically watched a moving vehicle violently strike another car and flip completely upside down onto the hard asphalt road. He immediately pressed his foot onto the brake pedal to stop his own car. He rapidly opened his metal car door, and he physically ran across the street toward the crushed and overturned vehicle. He physically dropped to his hands and knees and crawled directly into the broken window of the overturned vehicle, where he discovered a young boy with special needs physically trapped completely upside down in his car seat. Danny physically coordinated his hand movements with another female bystander who also crawled into the dangerous wreckage, and they worked closely together to physically unfasten the jammed metal seatbelt mechanism that tightly held the trapped boy. He physically wrapped his highly muscular arms around the young boy and carefully pulled the child's physical body out of the highly dangerous vehicle wreckage and away from the shattered glass. Throughout this entire physically dangerous rescue operation, Danny maintained complete emotional calmness, and he purposefully utilized his voice to verbally talk to the young boy about comic book superheroes to successfully distract the child's mind from the terrifying physical situation. He physically held the boy safely on the side of the road until the emergency medical personnel physically arrived at the exact location. This specific physical rescue action perfectly displayed his permanent ingrained nature as a highly trained former crisis counselor who always knew exactly how to utilize his voice and his physical presence to soothe another human being's intense physical fear during a massive crisis. Danny physically expanded his professional life into the commercial business world, by officially opening a physical chain of food restaurants called Trejo's Tacos in the year 2016. He subsequently followed this initial business success by physically opening a separate commercial establishment called Trejo's Coffee and Donuts in the year 2017. When he physically established the human resources department for these commercial businesses, he implemented a strict company policy that specifically prioritized hiring former prison inmates and individuals actively recovering from heavy drug addiction. He actively wanted to provide paying jobs to the exact type of people whom society had previously rejected, precisely because society had similarly rejected his own physical presence during his dark past. He physically handed legal employment contracts and regular monetary paychecks to individuals who possessed extensive criminal records, and he physically provided them with a highly safe working environment so they could rebuild their own physical lives. Even though he personally experienced multiple broken legal marriages and actively dealt with various severe financial problems and official bankruptcy filings throughout his adult life, he continuously lived a very simple daily physical lifestyle. He constantly maintained a tight physical and verbal connection with his local neighborhood community, and he regularly drove his car to local charity events to physically hand out hot meals to homeless individuals living on the streets. The entire documented life story of Danny Trejo represents a continuous chronological chain of severe physical tragedies that actively includes brutal family betrayal, extreme childhood physical violence, heavy chemical drug addiction, decades of physical prison sentences, a near-death legal experience inside a solitary cell, and a massive cancerous tumor. However, directly from that deep physical abyss of pain and suffering, he successfully managed to physically construct an absolutely extraordinary human journey. The desperate verbal promise he made to God while physically sitting inside a dark solitary confinement cell successfully transformed into a lifelong physical mission to actively assist vulnerable people on the city streets. His personal emotional pain successfully converted into the immense physical strength he consistently utilized to physically rescue other human beings from overturned cars and chemical drug addictions. The terrifying bad guy who physically intimidated global audiences on the large cinema screen officially became a highly active and genuine human hero in actual real life. He definitively proved through his continuous physical actions over multiple decades that no matter how physically deep the darkness becomes, an unyielding human soul still possesses the absolute ability to physically locate the light and physically deliver that exact same light to other people in desperate need.